Hello, Utes. This is Katie at Seabrook United Methodist. I've run out of daylight, so we are in the cleanest room in my house. We are in my guest room, and we are doing this by lamplight. And I'm having a little bit of difficulty reading, so just bear with me. But this begins the Biblical Bummers series. Several of you have asked that we discuss mental health, specifically depression, in relation to the Bible, what the Bible has to say about depression and mental health, anxiety, all of that stuff, which is a very good question, or a very good request, I should say. And I have been looking for the kids in the Bible that get the raw deal. I've been looking for the unsung heroes who do a lot but get very little face time in a Sunday school class. When I study for these lessons, whether it's in the classroom or now through video, I have to study up, and in so doing, I fall down rabbit holes all the time. I am the most disorganized biblical scholar in the whole world. And as I was looking for these unsung heroes in the Bible, I fell down a rabbit hole. And that rabbit hole this time is the entire book of Judges. This is a book that I have avoided until just maybe a week or two ago, that I thought this book was boring reveals my ignorance. This book is not boring. It is riveting. It's amazing. And we're going to go over the characters in this book. You should know, this is the book that I go by, the Storyteller's Bible. This kind of covers the soft reading for me. It includes a whole lot of midrash and Jewish context, which is so helpful, especially if you're reading the Old Testament. I also pull from my New International Version Cultural Background Study Guide Bible. It's huge and well loved. And what I love about this Bible, if you are in the market for a study Bible, is that this Bible is actually just from here up. From here down are the notes. These are tiny little footnotes that explain this. It explains language barriers. It explains translations, culture, context, all of that stuff. So I'm going by two different sources for the book of Judges. And I would like to start by saying we're not going to get through all of it this time. But there are a few things that need to be said before we start. Number one, these stories, the editor, Michael Williams, wrote a beautiful narrative introduction to Judges in the Storyteller's Bible, and I want to read a little bit of it to you because it's so beautifully written. And here we go. The Deuteronomist, the author of this book, writing in a time of grave Israelite defeat and discouragement, insisted that it was not God's fault that the Israelites were defeated. In ancient times, when two nations fought, it was believed that the gods of those nations fought as well. If a nation was defeated, the God of that nation suffered the reproach. But the Deuteronomist, drawing from the theological perspective of the book of Deuteronomy, insisted that Israelite defeats were not the result of the failure of Israel's God, but rather of the Israelites' failure to adequately serve their God. That's very interesting. Throughout this book, we hear that God delivered so-and-so into the Israelites' hands. God gave someone to someone else. What this is suggesting is that God isn't playing chess with these people. What I'm reading out of this foreword is that if the Israelites had been following God's plan, considering their free will, if their free will was fully in line with what God's will was at that time, then they wouldn't find themselves in the positions they were in. I'm dangling a participle, I'm sorry. Although this seems like a stinging rebuke to those who found themselves wrenched from their land and forced to serve foreign oppressors, it enabled the people to keep their faith with their deity. As long as Yahweh's love was neither inconstant nor inadequate, there remained the possibility of a return of Israel to the God, and a return of their God in gracious restoration. So what you see in the book of Judges is the Israelites succeeding, honoring God, doing great, great things, and then they do it wrong. They fall into traps. They screw it up, and then they find themselves oppressed by someone. And then they find a leader who is a judge. A judge, don't think about Judge Judy. Don't think about judicial judges. Think about leaders who were able to unite at least 2 tribes at a time. Remember, there are 12 tribes. These judges were able to come in and unite them. Think of Braveheart. Bring Hollywood into this. Think Braveheart. He was able to unite the clans. Judges were able to unite the tribes and fight their oppressors. And then that judge would lead the Israelites, and there would be peace and harmony and wonderful. And then he would die, or she. There was a woman. She would die, and then they'd fall into their same rut. And so this period of time, the Israelites were like this. And so they would honor, do a good job, fail, dishonor God. They would start worshiping other idols. They would stop taking care of each other. You get it. And so that's how the judges were born. That's what they did. The Deuteronomist, writing perhaps in the 6th century BCE, had available an enormous wealth of written and oral material, early legends and folk tales, court histories, military histories, and royal chronicles. The writer wove them together with varying degrees of skill into a single work that brought forth the Deuteronomic theological perspective. Each individual story had its own context. each had its own theological and historical purpose, often at significant variance with the Deuteronomic perspective as well as with each other. So within this book, if you think of the Bible as a library, this particular book in the Bible library is broken into very different stories within the same group of people. What remains is a rich and complex tapestry subject to various readings and interpretations, the parts relating tensively to the whole. Again, this book is a library of military campaigns. The editor has attempted to bring out the diverse perspectives, occasionally highlighting those that might be lost, were one to read all through the light of this later editor. I chose these passages, this is the editor speaking, I chose these passages because they are disturbing. Many of them do not readily provide a simple cut and dried moral lesson, and what lessons they might offer are often too difficult to bear. Many religious communities have given lip service to these passages. They must, because the stories are included in the sacred canon, but in practice, we usually either avoid them or domesticate them through harmonizing and misleading interpretations. Therefore, this editor commends to me these stories, many of them difficult and ambiguous. This editor asks me to keep them difficult and ambiguous. And that is a request I am going to honor with this video. Now, with all of that, this is my disclaimer. We're going to go over stories that are gross. So, if you are a delicate flower, if your parents think this is unsuitable for you, stop watching. But I hope you stay with me. You still with me? Okay, good. So, I just scrapped 16 minutes worth of video, and I realized I'm not doing these judges justice. Get it? So we have to break this book up into pieces. Before we do that, you have to remember that judges were leaders. They were not judicial powerhouses. Don't think Judge Judy. They were military leaders that were unique in that they could unite 2 or more tribes at a time in a time of military crisis. That was their special thing. And so we're going to read. We're going to read over these stories. And I'm only going to do a few this time because they're just so blah. The first judge was Othniel. Othniel was the son-in-law of Moses and Joshua's. Othniel was the son-in-law of Joshua's and Moses's greatest spy, Caleb. Caleb was a spy that was totally down to fight. He went and he scoped out the land with other spies when the Israelites were trying to stake their claim to the land. All the other spies were chicken, and they said that we can't fight them. We're tired. Our legs hurt. They're scary. Whereas Caleb, the spy, would say, we can totally do this. Let's do this. Caleb won a battle, promised his daughter to Othniel. I'm going to have to look at these names every now and then. Othniel was the model judge, according to the Storyteller's Bible. There were 40 years of peace under Othniel. So obviously he was doing something right. After Othniel, there was Ehud. And the foreword to this is, I don't get credit for this. This is the editor's note. Ehud goes on a mission to assassinate King Eglon, employing some preconceived notions about left-handed people. He accomplishes his task in one of the most graphic stories in the Bible. So, here we go. The Israelites had to pay tribute to the king. The king was in power for 18 years, I think. 18 years, sorry. He was a Moabite. And according to this, he was a very fat man. Why is that important? Just wait. So, Israelites have to pay tribute. The best person to pay tribute would obviously be the judge. The judge in this case is Ehud. Ehud is left-handed. There is ambiguity regarding his left-handedness. In this book, Ehud is left-handed. In this book, Ehud was a part of a group of people that would train in combat so that they were ambidextrous. They could use either hand for fighting. So we're not sure if Ehud is actually left-handed. What we do know is that he used his left-handedness, whatever that meant, to his benefit when he was paying tribute to the king. So these fighters, the right-handed fighters, would put their weapons, strap their weapons to the opposite leg. Right-handed guys would strap their knives, swords, whatever, on their left leg. Left-handed fighters would do the opposite. They would put their weapons on their right leg, which means if the majority of these fighters are right-handed, the military checkpoints would look for weapons on the left side. In Ehud's case, he could fight with his left hand, so his weapons were strapped to his right side. So when Ehud made it through the checkpoint, they were looking on the wrong leg. So Ehud breezes through the checkpoint with his tribute and a double-edged sword, a foot long, I think it says. So Ehud walks in, pays his tribute, exchanges pleasantries, and then it's time to go home. So as Ehud is leaving, he tells his company to go ahead without him. He turns around and he says, I have a message from God for King Eglon. Eglon hears this and is really excited. How cool is that, getting a message from God? So Eglon invites him in, and he makes all of the servants go away because this message is top secret. Ehud approached him while he was sitting alone in his cool second-story room. And he said, I have a message from God for you. At that, Eglon got up from his throne. Ehud reached with his left hand and grabbed the sword from his right thigh. He stabbed it into Eglon's stomach, and even the handle went in after the blade. Since he did not pull the sword out of his stomach, the fat closed over the blade, and his guts spilled out. Ehud slipped out to the porch and closed and locked the doors of the second-story room behind him. Okay, let's break that down. The servants. I'm sorry. I'm just sorry. I'm sorry. It's so gory. Woo. So he stabbed him so deep that the knife got lost in his belly, in Eglon's belly. And if the fat closed up around the knife, but guts spilled out, that would indicate that something happened on the backside. So Ehud runs the king through, period, and manages to get away. After Ehud had slipped out, the king's service came in and found that the room's doors were locked. So they thought he must be relieving himself. So this happened in a bathroom. They waited so long that they were embarrassed, but he never opened the doors to the room. When they used the key to open them, there was their master lying dead on the ground. Ehud had gotten away while they were waiting and had passed the carved stones to escape. Gross. According to the foreword in this book, there is even reliable speculation that Ehud escaped through a hole in the floor that emptied into the king's personal privy. That means toilet. That would explain how he was able to escape unseen, while the doors to the king's chambers remained locked from the inside. So, there's one. That's memorable. What's really kind of interesting, if you guys are familiar with the story of Ruth, Ruth was Eglon's daughter. What? Ruth was the daughter-in-law that would not leave Naomi when all of the menfolk in the family died. Small world. So I see that's been 11 minutes. So I think I'm going to end with this with the next judge, Shamgar. And the notable thing about this guy is that he struck down 600 Philistines with a cattle prod. And with that, children, wish you a good week. These stories are gory. They're gross. But if I had known the details, if these, I love what the editor said. I'll say it again, just in case you missed it. Because I know you guys. I know you guys love these Bible stories. They are disturbing. These passages are disturbing. Many of them do not readily provide a simple, cut and dried moral lesson. And what lessons they might offer are often too difficult to bear. We can't ignore that these stories are in here. And I dare not repeat them in a way that would risk changing them. They are supposed to be hard, and they are supposed to be short. Because you are supposed to go in and figure out what they mean for you. And I hope you do. As for Ehud and Eglon, maybe don't bring guests to the bathroom with you. Or be sure to check them thoroughly for weapons first. Anyway, man, I love this book. This is incredible stuff. Next time, we're going to talk about Deborah, the female judge. I'll see you next time.